she was like, you could tell that she was immensely proud of her work, regardless of how complex it is. And you could tell that she believed that she was carrying on the revolutionary spirit of resisting against American intervention and saving the lives of Cubans by doing so. Cubans are some of the best people, man. Straight up.
As always, source material will be cited in the corner of the screen throughout the video. Enjoy. In case you were unaware, there exists a small island nation less than 100 miles off the coast of the mainland USA with quite the reputation. A lot is said about this country, and the opinions held about it vary massively. If you listen to those sympathetic to the revolutionary history of Cuba, you'll be told the story of a selfless island nation off the coast of the world's most violent empire that, despite its struggles, which are almost entirely the result of economic warfare waged against it by the United States, gives whatever it can to those in need. Whether that be military assistance to those fighting white supremacists in southern Africa, offering medical aid to others, or even dramatically improving the quality of life domestically relative to the inequality and torture overseen on the island by the previous US-backed dictatorship. But who cares what this guy thinks? I mean, who even is that? These guys are the ones who know what they're talking about.
Cuba is the epicenter, is the headquarters of evil in the Western Hemisphere.
Socialist dictator who murdered all dissidents.
What could you possibly say that's positive about a man like Fidel Castro?
We are sitting in a dangerous predicament.
He actually created a giant gulag and sentenced everybody in the country to stay in it.
Wait, what? No, within just 2 years of the revolution, 200,000 Cubans emigrated, and over 500,000 left during its first decade. And Cuba went on to experience levels of immigration comparable to those of its neighboring countries in the late 20th century. While Cubans did need exit paperwork, and this process was often a bureaucratic mess, one of the main bottlenecks was often the receiving country, especially the US, which restricted legal visas while rewarding undocumented arrivals, seemingly encouraging the kind of dramatic spectacles that could be used for propaganda. And Fidel Castro himself declared the revolution strictly voluntary, and he even facilitated periodic mass exoduses, later agreeing to a US proposed airlift when dangerous sea departures became common. God damn it, Ben, you make it so hard for me to make a funny little montage when I have to pause and refute your bullshit. It's such a buzzkill.
We are on the edge of war and have been for some time.
He exiled all religious figures.
No, he didn't.
100 years from now, historians are going to look at Fidel Castro and say, this guy was a...
Yeah, isn't Cuba to America historically like Taiwan is to China? Always heard the history went really deep. No, what the fuck? No, Cuba is comprised entirely of Spanish and African migrants and slave labor initially. The fuck? Cuba was never a part of the United States of America. United States of America basically was a colonial occupant, and the indigenous population as well, which is ironically often forgotten.
to supersede Lenin and Stalin.
Under Batista, Cuba was one of the richest countries in Latin America.
Gross.
Fidel was a genius at evil, and right now they're ending those. Their days are numbered.
Che Guevara said, "There's a direct quote from Che, this piece of crap who you see people walking around with his face on T-shirts. It's like walking around again with a Stalin T-shirt. So to send men to the firing squad, judicial proof is unnecessary," is what Che Guevara said. "These procedures are an archaic bourgeois detail. This is a revolution. And a revolutionary must become a cold killing machine motivated by pure hate. We must create a pedagogy of the paradigm." That's the execution law.
This is a fabrication. Che never said this. It's attributed to Che, but in reality, it's the result of splicing together a bunch of random shit to form a blurb he never said nor wrote. In fact, this Frankenstein of a quote is contradicted by the historical record and does not represent Che's actions.
Yo, if you want to learn what Cuba is actually like, look at declassified CIA materials. Okay? Not the shit that the CIA was putting out as propaganda to the public. And not the, activated American Cubans, right? The Miami lobby. But just look at what they were openly saying behind closed doors. A lot of this information is already declassified, so it's very easy to find out on your own. That's all you need to do. They straight up in their analysis at the time in the Cuban Revolution were openly admitting that, one, the revolution did not have a socialist characteristic, even though it was an agrarian revolution, a national revolution, a social revolution, right? Having said that, initially they were like, there is not enough evidence here that Fidel Castro is a communist or a socialist at all. That came after, but it doesn't matter. Che Guevara always was a socialist. But not only that, but also they very openly looked at some of the punishments that came after the successful revolution. And the CIA said that in comparison to the mass executions and torture regime implemented by Batista, that the Cuban Revolution was shockingly bloodless, okay? Shockingly bloodless. So like whatever they were saying in their materials, okay, of propaganda was unironically the exact opposite of what they were saying behind closed doors.
For example, he never said judicial proof is unnecessary. In reality, he explicitly warned his judges to be scrupulous about weighing the evidence in each case so as not to give the revolution's enemies additional ammunition, wrote the foremost biographer on Guevara, John Lee Anderson. And the judge who gathered evidence and sat on the appellate bench with Che stated that, "We gave each case due and fair consideration, and we didn't come to our decisions lightly." So again, Ben is lying. There is no primary source to substantiate the claim that this quote was said or written by Che. It doesn't exist, and Che's actions contradict it. Are you going to let me do my montage now, dude?
Che Guevara, worse than Castro, obviously wasn't an official dictator, but what he wanted. Picture Adolf Hitler, who's bad, without the, some would call it, charm.
He asked the Soviet Union to actually nuke the United States.
Che Guevara was less charming than Adolf Hitler.
Mass murdering dictator.
For all of my criticisms of Adolf Hitler, he was punctual.
Summary executions, again, tens of thousands of people murdered.
We're Cuban Americans from Miami.
But in all seriousness, if you live in the West, odds are you've been raised to think the worst about Cuba. From stories of an evil dictator, Fidel Castro.
Not really. You know, what's really remarkable about this also is that, one, during the Cuban Revolution, Americans had a 50-50 split on it, especially a lot of black Americans were very fond of the Cuban Revolution. That's number one. And number two, when we say the West, we often think of just the United States of America. For the United States of America, that is the case, right? Tremendous amounts of propaganda about Cuba. But for the rest of the world, the United Nations has been demanding the end of this unjustifiable embargo for quite a while, for multiple decades. And not only that, but also the rest of the world has normal relations with Cuba. They just have to constantly dance around American embargoes. That's it. America is actually the odd man out here in comparison to the rest of the world. Like, countries have normal diplomatic relations with Cuba. Countries try to engage in commerce to the best of their ability beyond secondary sanctions in Cuba. You know, Free Press put out a hit piece on you. Yeah, once again, it's very strange. It's all Israel. It is like, I mean, this is obviously an Israeli outlet, as you guys know. This is an outlet that's like a Zionist outlet. It's very strange that America seemingly has outsourced its entire intelligence community to the beautiful nation state, the most moral nation of Israel. Very interesting.
Seizing power against the wishes of the population, then stealing everything for himself and plunging what was once a rich and prosperous country into ruin, to tales about the supposedly racist and homophobic revolutionary doctor Che Guevara, who apparently gave up on his Hippocratic oath and decided to Michael Myers his way across the island for no good reason.
Did you know that Che Guevara, was he the Cuban guy?
Well, he...
Or was that Castro?
Castro was Cuban. Che... He was part of the Cuban Revolution. He wasn't Cuban himself.
Yeah, Che, the revolutionary, he once executed a 12-year-old for being too anti-revolutionary. Shot him in the face, bro.
Yeah, no, he didn't.
Wow. Yeah, I heard it was a 10-year-old.
People like Hasan.
Dude, 12,000 views in 4 hours, man. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. No motion. Why are you even showing me this bullshit, bro? Come on.
Do that. This is what happens when you get all of your news.
This seems coordinated. Yeah, no, for sure. For sure. Steven Crowder, Ben Shapiro, Free Press, every single Hasbara outlet, every single one. Very strange.
From either Reddit or ChatGPT. You've surely heard about the poverty and the economic hardships in Cuba, which are supposedly solely the result of godless communist economics and not the blockade levied against Cuba by the United States, one that has been nearly unanimously condemned by the United Nations, with the predictable, consistent exceptions of the Yankees and Israel, though that list has grown in recent years to include other loyal dogs of US imperialism like Javier Milei's Argentina. The point I'm trying to make here is not that Cuba is some perfect paradise. It isn't. It's far from it, and people are suffering. It's true that I myself fall into the camp of Cuba sympathizers, but
how many crumbs did you toss at the kids? This is how you approach the subject matter. You just saw a couple tweets on the timeline. This is why Gulag exists. I know. I mean, holy fuck. The crumbs are what your dad ate from your mother's pussy after I came inside of it.
The goal with this video isn't to sell you the idea that Cuba is a utopia. It's to fill you in on an alternative perspective that gets relentlessly demonized in the West, to maybe challenge some of your preconceptions about the...
Not every critical left voice is CIA. That maybe they shouldn't be doing the work for free.
Island, and to show you how the real history of Cuba is one of anti-colonial struggle against the world's most brutal empires, and then decades of punishment for successfully throwing off the yoke of imperialism. If I can't get you to change your mind about the country, at the very least, this video will exist to show you who exactly you've been told to despise. You can decide for yourself whether the aggression toward Cuba is warranted, whether it deserves the designation in the United States as a so-called state sponsor of terrorism, or whether the country's economic issues are the result of economic illiteracy or a cruel and frankly genocidal blockade. In the spirit of full transparency, this video will start with the Spanish colonization of Cuba, then move into the period when the United States took over the exploitation, before getting into Fidel Castro's revolution and the relentless sabotage waged against the country by the US. Along the way, I'll be refuting the usual anti-Cuba tropes as they come up. Before we get started, I want to take a minute to thank today's sponsor, Exter. We talk a lot until April 13th with up to 45% off. And if you use the promo code OVERZEALOTS, you'll get an extra 20% off for a limited time. Click the link below and shop with confidence knowing that Exter offers a 100-day money-back guarantee. Now let's get back to the video.
What is bro's accent? He's Canadian,
the
if you
infamous
couldn't tell.
colonizer Christopher Columbus came in contact with and reported on the existence of a beautiful island we now know as Cuba. It wasn't actually Columbus who launched the conquest of Cuba, and
if I'm not mistaken, I think Overzealous used to be a left comm, and it's his unlimited admiration for the Cuban Revolution that might have actually turned him into a communist instead. I feel like he's talked about it, right? Like he used to be a left comm, but then he like loved Che Guevara and Fidel Castro so much.
It wouldn't be for another 19 years
that it turned him
somebody
into
did. And that someone was
maybe
a
a
Spanish
libertarian
conquistador
socialist
by the name of Diego de Velázquez, who invaded and started the Spanish colonization of the island in 1511. Prior to his conquest, Cuba was inhabited by multiple groups indigenous to the Americas. The earliest to arrive on the island were the Guanahatabes, migrants from the forests of northern South America who lived hunter-gatherer lifestyles.
Okay, bro. I mean, this is correct. This is I'm glad that he's going through all this. This is literally the same book that I'm reading currently, by the way, that let's see if he continues with some of the things that I recognize, but I'm sure he's read many books on Cuba because he like loves Cuba. But this is literally
The Taino made up the majority of the population by the time of contact with the Spanish, were skilled agriculturalists and very hospitable, according to Spanish accounts. They cultivated yucca root, which they baked into cassava bread, grew cotton, tobacco, and lived in houses known as bohíos, structures designed so efficiently that Spanish settlers were quick to copy them, and which remain a feature of Cuban architecture today. In fact, the very name Cuba comes from the Taino language. Now, the reason I'm telling you all of this is to weed out the presumptions that many Westerners hold about indigenous societies. And
the book that I'm reading, that there a lot of the information that he's talking about, which is like just a historic account, but summarizes it with like very similar languages. Cuba: A New History by Richard Gott. I think it's Richard Gott. Yeah, Richard Gott. Oh, he did. He put the source in the bottom. I didn't. Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah, Cuba: A New History, Richard Gott, Chapter 1. Yeah.
The arrogance of the colonizer is such that replacing a rich indigenous culture with a system of colonial looting and slavery is somehow branded as an improvement, and in some cases, portrayed as a great favor done to the colonized peoples. But that isn't true. In Cuba's case, the immense suffering inflicted on the island
It's a really
stands as
good book and very readable. Very, very readable. I highly recommend it.
Testament to the ills of colonialism and the post-colonial legacy it left behind. Once the Spanish took over the island, they enacted the encomienda system. As historian Greg Grandin explains in his book, America, America, the encomienda system in the context of the Americas refers to a kind of slavery, but indios encomendados, or commended Indians, weren't considered private property or chattel. Rather, they were formerly something like wards, members of an existing village or community who, in exchange for labor, were to receive instruction in Christian doctrine from their overlords, their guardian encomenderos. The encomienda was important.
No, there are leftists from inside the country now, who we should honestly contend with the socialist Cuba, the oligarch sincerity, and the humanitarian flotilla in El País. I saw, dude. Yes, Carlos Manuel Alvarez, who's an exiled Marxist from Cuba. We can engage his perspectives actually living in Cuba, or else it's a cult. How offensive to say any critical voices doing the CIA's work. It is true. It is true. You can have reasonable critique against the Cuban government. Okay. I mean, I literally fucking taught. I'm going to reveal it now. But one of the things that I said to the foreign vice minister was literally to ask why Cuba was so resistant to implementing some sort of economic reforms, like the opening up of the economy, like Deng Xiaoping did, okay? And I'm not the first person who has probably asked him that question. And I'm sure there are plenty. I mean, I talked to Cubans. Like, you're making it seem like I arrived at the conclusion I arrived at without, like, talking to any fucking Cubans about their day-to-day existence. I've also openly explained to you that there are plenty of young Cubans, especially, that have completely checked out of participating in the political, the political structure as a consequence of, as a direct consequence of feeling of helplessness, that genuinely think, for example, that the government is lying about the blockade and simply using the blockade as a fucking response mechanism for their own personal failures. Was it him? Yes, I did.
Countries.
Yeah, this is him. Yes, Cuban Deputy Foreign Minister, Vice Foreign Minister Cosio, Carlos Fernandez de Cosio. Very smart guy. Wow, what a great trade. One gives you labor and the other indoctrinates you, Lamau. What? Fair question, but I think the embargo cooked that. I mean, ironically enough, that's precisely what he said as well, that they are open for, they're open to reforms and have reformed since 2019 especially. Okay? But the you're responding to the video, the encomienda system.